Okay, today I'm going to show you how to remove the rear wheel on a rear drive e-bike. And so that's where you have the motor as integrated into the rear wheel. And you can identify this because you will have a big hub on the back, which is the motor, and you will also have this power cable going to that rear wheel. So the first thing to do is to just get the chain into the hardest gear or the smallest cog in the back. The next step is to unplug the cable, and sometimes you have to give it a pretty good tug, and then to cut any zip ties that you have securing that back part of the cable to the frame. And so now you can see that this is completely free. Before we actually remove these bolts, it's a very good idea to take note of how many washers are on either side of this dropout. So in this case, we have the bolt and one washer. And here you can see that there's one washer on the inside of the frame. And we're gonna have to know that when we put the wheel back on. So if this is one of your first times, it's a good idea to just take a picture so that you can easily put them back in the right order when you're putting the wheel back on. All right, now that we've noted the order of our bolts and washers, we can go ahead and just remove these bolts. And then same thing on the other side. Taking care not to have any of this stuff drop on the floor. So this step is a little different than on a normal bike. On a normal bike, when you remove these bolts, you should be able to very easily slide this wheel out. For these e-bikes, this axle is not actually rounded. And so what that allows you to do is take a 10mm wrench. You can slide it on here and give it a slight clockwise turn so that you're lined up. This bike wheel should just pop right out. To reinstall the wheel, the easiest thing to do is to flip the bike upside down. I just have these handlebars resting on these little spacers. That way all of the computers and the electronics that I have are not touching the ground. All right, now that we have our bike flipped upside down, we can go ahead and try to put the wheel back in. You can see here we have this notch on this washer, and we want to make sure that that notch on both sides is pointed up. Then you kind of just slide this through the chain so that it gets on that smallest sprocket. It can help if you pull the derailleur back. And then you kind of just slide this in. And it can take a bit of manhandling to get it to go. You also want to make sure that this rotor is going inside the brake, and it can help if you can kind of pull the frame a little bit out. Now, get to a point, let me zoom in on this. You can see here where we're not, this has to be inside this gap here. So we're turned clockwise a little bit too far. And this again is where you can take your 10mm, just kind of turn it backwards. You can see now it's in the slot there. And that's how we want it to be, tucked in nice and snug. Okay, so now that we have this notch in the correct orientation and my wheel is spinning freely, then I know that everything is set correctly. I can go ahead and put the washer and the bolt back on. In this case, just keep it finger tight. Go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Again, just finger tight. The reason I like to go finger tight is to to make sure the wheel is seated properly, it's actually easiest to flip the bike back over before you do your final tightening so that you have the weight of gravity pushing the wheel into the most secure location. All right, with the bike flipped back, right side up, you can go ahead and tighten these bolts until they're pretty snug. Do the one on the other side, and then plug this back in. These typically have 2 arrows so that you can get the orientation correct. Just line up the arrows and then push it in. We can put this cap back on, and then also don't forget to pop a zip tie in just to keep that out of the way. And that's it. That's how you remove and put back a wheel on a rear hub drive e-bike. Hope that was helpful.